Hello, today is Friday, May 17th, 2024. Tomorrow is May 18th. It's 五一八节, in Chinese. It's May 18th. About in 1980, May 18th, there was a revolution in my town, Gwangju, and it tried to overthrow then the military junta of John Tu-wan, who is a very bad guy. He's a dog. So many people were killed by his army. It was a peaceful demonstration against the military coup, military occupation. But finally, the military won, and the civilians, they were killed, imprisoned, and they just ignored. So we are now their fame, their reputation has been restored, and we commemorate their effort to bring in the new democracy into Korea. And tomorrow is a big day for this town. But regardless, I'm going to read this article from the U.S. military. I was with the U.S. military for 2.5 years as a Katusa soldier, Korean augmentation troops to the U.S. Army. Yes, I was assigned to the U.S. Army 8th Personnel Service Command, and my unit was 516th Personnel Service Company. Now it's a Personnel Service Battalion, but then it was just a company based in both in Pyeongtaek and Daegu, or USAG Camp Humphreys and Camp Henry. So I am very keen on the U.S. military activities. I have very good feelings, good memories with the U.S. Army. So I'm going to read this article to see if I get the feeling back. And also, since I am pure Korean, I've never lived outside Korea. But I hope to have an overseas assignment sooner or later. So I need to practice English every day. And as a part of my determination to study English, I'm going to read this article. So it's a purely academic effort, and also to pick up knowledge, and also knowledgeable about things around us. So here we go. By the way, if you find my pronunciation needs to be corrected, please don't hesitate to comment. Leave your reply in the reply section, and I would be happy to take in your recommendation, advice, comments, and move on and continue to practice English with your advice. This article is from ALSA, Association of the United States Army. Okay, so warfighters focus. George feels sense of urgency for really busy army. Michelle Tan, editor-in-chief. So this article is editorial. Monday, April 1st, 2024. So it has been a 45-day-old article, editorial. While the army must transform for the future, it also must move with urgency to contend with today's increasingly volatile and complex world, the service's top general said. The difference today is the tech disruption we've had. The volatility is completely different, and just how fast things are spinning on the tech side. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George said, I think it's completely different from what we've seen, and there's a lot of implications with that and how we do business and how we change. Since being sworn in last September as the 41st Army Chief of Staff, George has traveled across the Army and visited the soldiers at home station and deployed. Soldiers at home station and deployed, right? At home station and at deployed station. It's singular, right? At home, at station, I don't know. At home stations sounds more familiar, but this is a standard English. And at home station and deployed. Let's remember that phrase, right? It could be used commonly many times. At home station and deployed. George said, what? In his travels, George said he's been able to see how soldiers are adapting to the challenges of missions around the world. I've been really getting out there and talking to our troops, he said. What we want to do is focus on our warfighting mission and building cohesive teams. Cohesive teams. Focus on our warfighting mission. That's another good cliche coming out of the military. Warfighting mission and building cohesive teams, right? Not fragmented teams. Cohesive teams. Teamwork. His time with the troops has reinforced his belief that the Army must focus on warfighting. Warfighting. I always tell everybody that has to be the focus, George said at a recent event hosted by the Association of the U.S. Army, and in an interview afterward. I want leaders at every level to understand that's what we are focused on. If we are not relaying that message all the way down with what you are doing, then we need to recalibrate what we are doing. Recalibrate what we are doing. Recalibrate what we are doing. Relaying that message all the way down with what you are doing, then we need to recalibrate what we are doing. The Army cannot afford to wait, George said. The environment's going to change anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months, he said. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George speaks at the Dwight D. Eisenhower luncheon during the 2023 Association of the U.S. Army annual meeting and exposition in Washington, D.C. in October. Advancing Technology. A 1988 graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, New York, George previously was the Army Vice Chief of Staff and is a former commander of I Corps and the 4th Infantry Division. So I think since I entered my university in 1986, I think he's 2 years senior to me. He must have been born in 1966 or 67. So I feel affinity with him. A veteran of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, George said, today's Army faces a different battlefield. In the past, the Army built itself to deploy brigade combat teams back and forth to Iraq and Afghanistan. George said, we have to adjust to the contemporary battlefield, and we are doing that. In the next fight, soldiers likely will operate in small groups dispersed across large areas. There will be sensors everywhere, making it nearly impossible to hide. Increasingly sophisticated cyber attacks and electronic warfare will threaten communications, and drones will be an ever-growing threat. The war in Ukraine is an example. Georgia has said, on the battlefield today, everything is a sensor, he said. I recall when satellite technology brought news from the battlefield to Americans' living rooms. That in and of itself gave a new dynamic to warfighting. That's a good sentence, man. in and of itself. It's kind of cliche, right? In itself and of itself. But usually they say them in pair. That in and of itself gave a new dynamic to warfighting. Gave a new dynamic to warfighting. That in and of itself gave a new dynamic to warfighting. Soldiers with the 3rd Squadron, 2nd Cavalry Regiment, trained in Vilseck, Germany, credit U.S. Army Reserve Sergeant Kenneth Rodriguez. Credit U.S. Army Reserve Specialist William Kwang. Sounds like Chinese, right? Kwang, Chinese background. I am studying Chinese. 我学习汉语3年了。No one can hide. Now everyone has better cameras in their pockets and they are connected to the cloud, George said. No one can hide and no information is safe, he said. Where we can see, we can hit, and we can see everywhere. Additionally, logistics are more complex, particularly long logistics tails that can easily be hit or sabotaged, and autonomous systems are a growing challenge, George said. Particularly long logistics tails. Particularly long logistics tails. Particularly long logistics tails. Particularly long logistics tails. Yeah, long tail, right? Short tail, long tail. The end part of some business, end part of the process, end part of the revenue graphs, right? Long tail, short tail. Additionally, logistics, so they use logistics, right? Not logistics tails. To meet some of these challenges, the Army must prioritize the network, which is one of the service's top transformation priorities, and look for ways to incorporate unmanned aircraft systems, robotics, 3D printing, and other emerging technologies to bolster the force. It also means minimizing units' footprints, digital and physical, on the battlefield. Yeah, we need to minimize units' footprints. It's better to win a combat or a war with less footprint, with less area of occupation where the war or combats are fought. Minimizing units of footprints. The network has to be the number one priority, George said. You cannot communicate, you cannot command and control. Everything we do across our warfighting functions depends on our network. In addition to building a reliable, secure network, the Army must have a network that's mobile and agile. When you are on the battlefield, you don't want to be seen. You want to blend into the environment, George said. When you are on the battlefield, you don't want to be seen. You want to blend into the environment. When you are on the battlefield, that's another good expression that Army soldiers use a lot. When you are on the battlefield, when you are on the battlefield. The sprawling command posts on forward operating bases in Iraq and Afghanistan will no longer work, George said. That will get us killed on today's battlefield, he said. Sprawling command posts. You need to minimize units of footprints on forward operating bases. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George Wright discusses troop maneuvers with a soldier from the 2nd Brigade Combat Team 101, 101st Airborne Division, right? 101, 101st Airborne Division Air Assault at the Joint Readiness Training Center, Fort Johnson, Louisiana. Formerly known as Fort Polk. Credit, U.S. Army shall be warriors. At the Joint Readiness Training Center. I guess joint means like Navy, Air Force, Airspace, and the Army. They all come together to win the battlefield. Reduce the footprints. During a visit earlier this year to the National Training Center at Fort Irwin, California, George said he observed as the 1st Armored Division's tactical command post was 5 vehicles protected by a radio frequency shield and a small unmanned aircraft system and a command and control node that could be moved in 5 minutes. The 3-course command post was hidden in a warehouse with no vehicles parked outside. That's what we need, George said. It was very low signature, right? High key, low profile, low key approach, low profile, low signature. That's what we need, George said. It was a very low signature. It was a very low signature. This sentence is very good. It was a very low signature. It was a very low signature. It was a very low signature. To further experiment with reducing a unit's digital footprint while maximizing technologies such as robotics and unmanned aircraft systems, the Army is selecting some deploying brigades for what George calls transforming in contact. Transforming in contact. The goal is to adjust these formations for what the mission may demand. As an example, George said, a unit may get more unmanned aircraft systems and electronic warfare capabilities. Another may get more robotics or the first batch of next-generation squad weapons. They then will train with these new capabilities and provide feedback on what's working and what's not. And provide feedback on what's working and what's not. Yeah, I know the expression, but I would like to memorize it one more time. Provide feedback on what's working and what's not. Provide feedback on what's working and what's not. We have things in our formation that need to adjust and need to change, George said. Based on what we are seeing with the lessons on the battlefield, this is going to give us an opportunity to do that. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George Wright visits with a soldier from the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 101st Airborne Division Air Assault, at the Joint Readiness Training Center. Fort Johnson, Louisiana, formerly known as Fort Polk. Credit, U.S. Army shall be warriors. Yeah, it's good to play, the controller at a war game, man. New capabilities. One of the units tapped for this is the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 101st Airborne Division, 101, right? Airborne, danger, ranger, airborne, ranger. Whoo! Air assault, George said. The brigade, which in January completed a rotation at the Joint Readiness Training Center at Fort Johnson, Louisiana, formerly known as Fort Polk, will get small unmanned aerial vehicles and the new next generation squad weapons, George said. I wonder what is the next generation squad weapons. Next generation. See, that's the hyphen there. Next generation squad weapons. The Army also is going to adjust their network and look at how it can add to their formation with robotics, George said. The soldiers will train with the new equipment and capabilities then return to the Joint Readiness Training Center, he said. They are looking at how can they make their formation more lethal, and adjust their formation to today's realities on the battlefield, George said. Feedback from the soldiers as well as those from other units chosen to participate in this effort will be used to inform additional changes throughout the force. This will inform how the Army needs to adapt going forward, George said. Several units will begin this process over the next couple of months, George said. Soldiers from the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, 101st Airborne Division, already are adapting and learning, George said. Those soldiers are so innovative, he said. They are adjusting and learning over there, and that's what we need to do. Another area the Army is examining is its light or medium brigade combat teams, George said. What we know is we need to be more strategically mobile, he said. My example is we have a light formation that has way too many vehicles, which are targets on the battlefield. So there are things we need to do to adjust. General Randy George left is sworn in as the Army's 41st Chief of Staff at Joint Base Elmendorf, Richardson, Alaska. Credit U.S. Army Sergeant First Class Michael Sword. That's good. General Randy George is sworn in as the Army's 41st Chief of Staff. Drone wars. The way the Army conducts reconnaissance also will change with the advent of unmanned aircraft systems, he said. These systems continue to be a challenge, and that it's a reality of today's battlefield, George said. A particular challenge is countering these systems. I think we have to do more, George said. He added that the Army is putting users, developers, and testers together in the Middle East to come up with solutions. I was over in the Middle East and standing there on the roof of a building, whether it was up in Erbil in Iraq or in Syria at a small outpost, you understand how different those environments are and what we need to do to increase our capability, said. It's moving, it's adjusting rapidly, so what we want to do is to be forward and actually have everybody on the ground start adjusting. Robotics are another element of the future battlefield, and the Army must look for ways to leverage the growing capability. Leverage growing capability. Yeah, that's another common cliche the Army high-ups use. Leverage the growing capability. Leverage growing capability. Another element, right? If you can put a robot in contact and save lives, to do that, breaching is a good example of that. Then we should be looking at ways to do it. George said, so it's a new expression, if you can put a robot in contact, put a robot in contact and save lives. George said, put a robot in contact. George said he also is focused on how the Army can unencumber commanders and soldiers, such as getting rid of excess equipment so they can focus on the important tasks. Unencumber commanders and soldiers. Unencumber unencumbered commanders and soldiers. Last fall, George cited as an example a company commander in Europe whose property book was 118 pages. That makes no sense, George said then. We will take that off commanders' plates and off soldiers' plates. They shouldn't be spending time caring for equipment they don't need. Well, property books was 118 pages. Damn, a lot of properties. That makes no sense. That makes no sense, George said then. We will take that off commanders' plates and off soldiers' plates. They shouldn't be spending time caring for equipment they don't need. A pilot program from October through December at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, formerly known as Fort Bragg. Really? Yeah, Fort Bragg is famous for airborne division, right? And Fort Stewart, Georgia, yielded 37,068 pieces of excess equipment, freeing up commanders from having to account for obsolete or excess equipment. Freeing up the property. Freeing up commanders from having to account for obsolete or excess equipment. I wish to have those excess equipment, man. The pilot was run at Fort Campbell, Kentucky in February, and it will take place at Joint Base Louis McChord, Washington in June, with other installations planned for later in the year, George said. It's a really busy Army. We have to make some adjustments, George said. There's a sense of urgency to what we are doing. Army Chief of Staff General Randy George administers the oath of enlistment to more than 600 new recruits and current service members during the NFL's Call to Service event at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, credit U.S. Army Sergeant First Class Alexander Greenson. That's good. He administers the oath of enlistment. The oath of enlistment. That's good. That's good expression. Administers the oath of enlistment to more than 600 new recruits and current service members. Re-enlistment, I think, during the NFL's Call to Service event. Call to Service event. Call to Service event. Yeah. U.S. sports industry really cooperates well with the U.S. military. So the general administered the oath of enlistment to 600 new recruits and current members at the NFL's Call to Service event. Agility, flexibility. As the Army transforms, it must be agile and flexible when it comes to adopting new technology, George said. We are going to have to be much more rapid in our systems, he said. And any system the Army gets must be simple and intuitive for the soldiers operating them, George said. They have to be able to be operated by one or two people very simply. He added, anything that's on the battlefield that cannot move quickly is not going to survive. We've got to look at things that are mobile and can get shots off rapidly and very accurately. The Army also must partner with industry. Partner with industry. Here, industry is singular. So it's more like a conceptual word. The Army also must partner with industry, he said, particularly in emerging areas such as unmanned aircraft systems and data. Wherever we can, I think we really need to leverage the power of American industry to help us figure this out. The power of American industry. the power of American industry. The power of American industry. The service also must apply what is learning at its schoolhouses. We want to see out of the lessons what we are learning, what we are doing to change our training, George said. What are we doing to change our professional education? What are we doing to change the equipment we need on the modern battlefield? George said he tells leaders that everybody has a job to do at every level of the Army, and the service must do everything it can to make sure soldiers have the right leaders, equipment, and training they need when they go into harm's way. 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 We can't forget that, regardless of how far you get from the front line, he said. That's our mission, and we need to keep that at the forefront. We need to keep that at the forefront. When the Army soldiers go into the harm's way, leverage that power. We need to partner with industry, the power of American industry, the power of American industry. We need to partner with industry, leverage, and what else? Lack of, he didn't use the word lack, empowerment, shave that off. We shave that off. Property book of 118 pages, property book. We need to take that off the commander's plates. He administered the oath of enlistment to 600 new recruits and re-enlisted soldiers at the NFL's call to service event, right? He needed some kind of event to show so that more American soldiers, American people will sign up or enlist in the Army or the military. When I was very young, when I was a soldier with the U.S. Army, Katusha soldier, I was tempted to enlist in the U.S. Army. If I did that, I probably was sent to the war in Iraq. Probably I was killed. So I'm very, or maybe I was sent to the Afghanistan or some other harm's way. So I'm really lucky. I feel lucky, and I appreciate my own decision and my own the U.S. Army, who they were interested in hiring me as an enlisted soldier, but I just refused. Unmanned aircraft, downsizing, moving. We have a busy Army is busy. What else? Command and control center. Light formation. They use the word formation. Robotics. Put a robot in contact. Put a robot in contact. So this article is about changing the Army, adjusting and changing going on with the 101st Airborne Division. They're going to have more light formation. They're going to shave off a lot of unnecessary or excess equipment of the commander's plates and soldiers' plates. And also they're going to use new technology. They're going to tap into the power of American industry. So they are going to partner with industry, like McDougall's, Raytheon, Khaki, SAIC, Northrop Grumman, all other good industry players there, military industry. They are very large and they are very good companies. I like to work for Northrop Grumman, McDouglas, and Raytheon, if I can, because I studied mechanical engineering and I worked in the telecommunications industry for 30 years now. I work for Korea Telecom KT, the number one carrier in Korea. And what else? Yep, this is a good article from the Army. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful Friday, wherever you are.